Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Doom Productions podcast, a podcast where we share filmmakers' worst nightmares. I'm Jordan,
I'm Ethan.
I'm Zach.
and this is the podcast where every single week we talk about a production of a film that, for one reason or another, ran into problems. We took a little hiatus because we took a trip up to Yakima to visit our filmmaker friends up at RC Films, and that was a fun trip.
We made a movie.
We did make a movie, yeah. So it was kind of eventful. We promised that we would record a podcast up there, record stuff, but we actually didn't get around to doing it because we were busy making the movie. But do you guys want to share how the trip went, just for our viewers who are paying attention?
It felt like it went really fast because I mean, it did. It was like an overnight trip. So it was just a Saturday through Sunday, but it felt super, super quick. So it's kind of a blur. But on day one, we like rolled up into Yakima. We checked into our hotel. We went to our location and we planned and shot a movie. That was day one. And then we went to Olive Garden.
We at the end of the night on Saturday, we did a little screening of La Danza for the RC Films boys and gave them a little sneak peek. And
we did.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. That was just day one.
And then the second day. Yeah, and then the second day, Zach, do you want to talk about that? What we did on Sunday?
Yes. I'm trying to remember. Oh yes. So we just hung out with
Grannon.
Yes. Okay. So now it's coming back to me. Okay. I swear I was sober the whole trip.
We went
most of the trip.
We did the hotel breakfast.
Yes,
that was important.
Breakfast.
Got some coffee, got some free coffee. And oh my gosh, my thing is going to be going off.
And one other thing that we realized is 3 men sharing a room, bringing in a bunch of camera equipment at a hotel raises some eyebrows from the staff.
It literally raised a couple eyebrows. Yeah.
It was pretty funny. And I don't think it dawned on us fully until we were leaving. I was like carrying a tripod and camera bag out, and we'd already gotten an odd look the day before. It was like, oh wait.
Well, she was like, and you guys got the queen bed, right?
King bed.
Or the king bed, right? And we were like, yep. She's like, just the one bed. And you're like, well, with the pull-out couch too. And she's like doing the math, and she's like, 1, 2, 3. There's 3 of you.
A king bed's a lot of space, I realize, because my wife and I have a queen bed, and with a king, there's a whole other space. We could have fit all 3 on it, and we barely would have known.
We could have.
This is just us justifying a situation that looked a certain way.
Let them stare, let them watch, let them listen.
They're jealous.
But it was a really nice hotel, actually.
It was. It was the nicest hotel I think I've ever been in, and we were hardly in there. It was
But anyways, we met up with Kate and Gage from the Yakima scene, and Mario. But we saw Mario both days, actually.
Wait, we saw him twice. Once on accident, just at Starbucks.
Yeah. That was fun.
That was so fun. It led me to believe that he lives at that Starbucks, because every time I'm there, he's there.
Yeah. Fun stuff. And then we hung out with RC Films. We did a lot of... I don't know if we can talk about it.
Well,
oh my gosh, this thing.
What we can say is this. A movie that you may or may not know about is very good.
We coerced them.
We
threatened other filmmakers into sharing some details about projects that they're working on.
We may or may not have bullied some filmmakers. We might have bullied some filmmakers into showing us scenes from their movie.
And it was all part of the plan.
Yeah.
It went down very effective. We're very good at convincing people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Broken kneecaps, and
we also saw footage from a music video that Grandin Films was working on. We saw some stuff from Gage, stuff he's working on for his Marana segment, which is awesome.
I reopened some Da Vinci Resolve this week to mess around again.
Yeah.
Because of the Granite Girls. Because just looks so fun to color grade. So I need to learn it.
Oh gosh, I want to tell the story of how I don't want to hold on. He's totally asleep. He's totally at work or something right now, isn't he?
Both. He's asleep and at work.
I'm not going to share it because I don't have his permission.
Oh.
But I want to share it. Like at some point I want to talk about how this footage was presented to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was a great weekend, and we did a lot of filming, a lot of planning, a lot of hanging out, but it was good, and we had a good time.
Yeah.
Anyways,
and Olive Garden was a trip.
Oh yeah.
Yes, Olive Garden was a trip.
Yeah, we'll just leave that for another day.
Yeah, but anyways, back to our scheduled programming. If you're still with us for this far in, thank you for sticking around. But on this podcast, we do tell stories about films that we've researched who had trouble productions, and the film that I will be talking about today is The Island of Dr. Moreau from 1996.
Ooh.
Have you two heard of this movie?
No.
Not only heard of it, I own a copy on VHS, and I haven't watched it yet.
So you haven't seen it, but you've heard of it.
No, lazy bum.
I got it in the Goodwill in Tigard, because every year around Halloween they have a selection that's just for scary movies that come in, and they'll have like a little Halloween section, and I saw it and I was like, ooh, that's a cool cover, and so I grabbed it, and that was it.
Cool.
Don't worry about it. I'm being hypocritical. I have a whole row of movies I haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
Well, after hearing this story, you're gonna want to watch it. Full disclosure, in keeping up with my track record of researching movies and talking about them, I haven't seen this one. So again, I'm not going to talk about how it turned out really, because I have no way of knowing. And yeah, so let's get into it. Island of Dr. Moreau. The director was John Frankenheimer. The writer was Richard Stanley and Ron Hutchinson. The producer was Edward R. Pressman, and it starred Marlon Brando, Val Kilmer, David Thewlis, I can never pronounce his name. The Remus Lupin from Harry Potter.
Oh.
And Firuza Balk, who she was did you see Waterboy, the Adam Sandler movie?
No, I've heard of that one, but I've never seen it.
Have you seen The Craft with the witches?
Mm-mm.
Have you seen American History X? Okay, I think she was in American History X. I think she was the racist girlfriend of Edward Norton or something like that.
Right on. Okay. Yeah.
But,
right.
Great actress. It wasn't a lot of stuff back in the day. But anyways, 1996. The premise of the novel, I mean, I think most people know about it, but just to recap real quick, a guy named Edward Prendick, he's shipwrecked onto this island. He's rescued by a passing boat, and he's left on the island of the home of Dr. Moreau, a mad scientist who's creating human-like hybrid beings from animals through surgeries, essentially. So the movie, well, first off, I want to preface this by two things. I got a lot of this information from two places. One is just going through Wikipedia, clicking on the different, the little links and footnotes and stuff like that. But the other half of this was taken from this documentary called The Island of Lost Souls, which everyone should check out because it tells the story of the making of this movie. But if you don't have time to watch a whole documentary right now, listen to this, keep listening. But that's where a lot of this information came from. So in the documentary and all the research, this was a project that was meant to propel Richard Stanley, the director, the original director, into superstardom as like this new kind of like it director. Richard Stanley directed Hardwire. I think it was Dust Devils was the other one. But recently he directed The Color Out of Space with Nicolas Cage. And so this was his project that was supposed to put him on the map, essentially.
Got it.
And he'd seen a version of The Island of Dr. Moreau as a kid in 1977, which was partially inspired this kind of dream project. This was a pet dream project of his that he had for a long time. He spent 4 years of developing the movie even before he got a green light from New Line Cinema. So this is like, picture your dream novel you'd like to adapt, and picture spending 4 years on that. I mean, that was it was that for Richard Stanley. And so, you know, once it was greenlit by New Line Cinema, he had kind of imagined a certain actor as Dr. Moreau. I've never heard of this guy before, but his name was, I think, Jurgen Prochnow. I can't pronounce his name.
Is that a Russian actor?
I have no idea. No idea. It was European of some sort. So that's who Richard Stanley wanted as a role once they started once he got greenlit. But New Line got Marlon Brando instead. And during this time, Richard Stanley learned that in this period, New Line had also gone behind his back to offer the film to Roman Polanski. So New Line was like, hey, we got Marlon Brando. We don't need Richard Stanley. Let's go to Roman Polanski and see if he wants to direct the movie. And so Stanley heard that, he wanted to, he heard about this and he was like, what the hell's going on? What's going on? And so he called he called a meeting with Marlon Brando, and he had heard before he met with Marlon Brando, because they had never met face to face. He heard him about the meeting that Marlon Brando was pissed and did not want to go to a meeting. And so Richard Stanley resorted to witchcraft. He's known to dabble in the kind of mystic arts and whatnot. And so he knew a warlock whose name I forget, but it's in the documentary. They say his name. So he had a warlock complete a ritual to save his movie and to kind of mend things before they were broken. And there's a couple other things he asked him to do, but he visited this warlock and he met with Marlon Brando, who was surprisingly sympathetic to his vision, who sat down with Richard Stanley and was like, oh, you have a vision. This sounds like something I'd be into. I'm really interested in this part. I'm going to back you as director, because remember, New Line was like, oh, we got Marlon Brando. We don't need anybody else. We'll go and find a new director. And so something Richard Stanley theorized was that, Marlon Brando was still that leftover of playing Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now. Marlon Brando was still fascinated with that character. And Dr. Moreau is a very similar kind of character of traveling up this island to find this mysterious person. So he was very drawn to that aspect. And, because Brando liked this, his vision, he backed him, and the studio's like, okay, Richard Stanley's the director now. And then they went into pre-production officially. So hang on to your butts, because it gets wild. Pre-production, right. Stanley got Bruce Willis as the main protagonist, Edward Prendick, and James Woods as Montgomery, another character, kind of a secondary character. And he collaborated with Stan Winston, who worked on Terminator, Jurassic Park, Aliens, lots of VFX stuff, to prepare the creatures and the sets for this movie. They decided to shoot in a rainforest in Cairns in North Queensland, Australia, a very isolated part of the country from how it's described, I believe. And as productions approached, lots of problems came up already. So let me just kind of bullet point. Here are all the issues that came up. So first up, Bruce Willis dropped out of the film because he was getting divorced from Demi Moore. And he was replaced with Val Kilmer, who demanded a 40% reduction in the number of days he was required to be on set. So you have Bruce Willis, and he's like, I'm in, now I'm out. You get Val Kilmer, and Val Kilmer was like, well, I don't want to be on set for about half the time, roughly. So, and he's like, this is right around Batman Forever time too. So he was a major star. And so to solve this problem, Richard Stanley had Val Kilmer as Montgomery, the supporting role. And then James Woods had to leave the production. And then Rob Morrow was then cast as the lead role. So there was a shuffling of roles happening before cameras started. Um, during the design of the creatures for the movie, another problem was New Line wanted to kind of reel Richard Stanley back from his designs. He had some really kind of outlandish designs, like I'm trying to remember from the documentary. There's like stuff where I think something that was referenced was like there was like a cat lady with a ton of different nipples, and that was something that kind of worried the studio, like the grotesqueness and uniqueness of these monsters. That was something that concerned the studio.
Mhm.
That was another problem that came up. Oh, forgot. When Stanley met with Kilmer in Japan. So Kilmer's promoting Batman Forever, or is it Batman and Robin? Which one is it?
Batman Forever. Batman and Robin was
Yeah.
Clooney.
Okay, Batman Forever. There's a Japanese premiere for Batman Forever. So Richard Stanley goes to meet Val Kilmer, and the night that he meets him, he has a sleep paralysis, which, because Richard Stanley's all into witchcraft and mysticism and spirituality, he took this as like a sign, as like, uh-oh, things are not going to go well.
Mhm.
More problems came up. This kind of seems to originate from the director himself. So Richard Stanley, right? He's this very indie, low budget. Well, not I don't want to say low budget, but very indie director. This is the first major Hollywood movie he's ever worked on.
Yeah.
Um, and so he rented out this really nice house, and he didn't like to go to meetings, um, like production meetings, like, we got to meet with location, we got to do location scouting, or we got to look over the wardrobe, all the kind of logistical stuff. Richard Stanley, I seem to get the impression that he had to be dragged to go to these things. And so
Mhm.
he didn't really own or take that typical leadership role from the accounts of the people who worked on the movie. So he wouldn't go to the production meetings. What he would do was he would have his storyboard artist draw storyboards, and then they would distribute that to the crew. And so that's how he communicated, which is very non-typical on a movie of this scale.
That's a
Um,
lot. That's a lot of trust
Yeah.
you're putting in your crew as the
yeah,
Yeah.
director to like execute on your vision.
I mean, I could see us doing that and doing okay, but
Yeah.
on a giant movie, and this is your first giant movie, I don't know about that.
Yeah. That's different.
Another bad omen. A PA was bitten by a poisonous spider. Can't remember if they lived or died. I think they lived.
I mean, it's Australia, so what do you expect?
Yeah. Um. Okay. Okay. Here I do have it in my notes. So the warlock, as the approaching production, the warlock's name is Skip, and Skip's fixes slowly became undone. So, like for instance, um, he had done like a ritual to help, like Richard Stanley's mother, and during the pre-production, his mother was struck by lightning. Um, and during like this time period, Skip across the world had like dislocated his hip. There was lots of different like signs, like I think Richard Stanley mentioned seeing like hyenas, which was like a bad omen or something like that.
Hmm.
So they're like, from the spiritual side of things, Richard Stanley is like, uh-oh, like a storm's coming. And in addition to all this, going back to Val Kilmer, he had lots of petty disagreements with everybody, and it seemed like a power game, from everybody who was a part of this crew. Um, most important, one of the hugest things. Shortly before filming began, Marlon Brando's daughter died. She had died by suicide, and so in reaction to this, like obviously, like he went into pretty much he went to a private island and secluded himself because he was in grief and mourning, which I think is probably the most understandable out of all these, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but Marlon Brando already has the reputation, right, of being kind of difficult to work with. So the whole crew and the directors are in limbo because they don't know, like, if he's going to show up. Because on a good day, it's hard to get him to show up. He's in grieving and mourning right now. He might never
Yeah.
ever come back from his island. So
Yeah.
that's another thing. Um, going back to kind of closer to shooting and everything. Um, tensions rose between the studio and Richard Stanley. Again, because he didn't like to attend studio meetings, and he was very kind of quirky and kind of odd. He was like an odd outsider. And they reached a crisis point within the first few days of filming. So the a huge a huge kind of thing that made this worse was, again, Richard Brando was his biggest backer. He was like, Richard Brando's a huge star. He backed this director, and that's what kept the studio off his back. But with Marlon Brando gone, it was like, well, now there's no one to like. They're just going to bully the director around. But what everybody says, again, was the biggest problem was Val Kilmer, who reportedly arrived 2 days late. And later, years later, talking about his behavior, Kilmer said that his behavior was due to the fact that he was being sued for divorce by his wife at the time. But for whatever reasons, everybody testified that Kilmer was just bullying and consistently hostile and obstructive on the first few days of shooting. Like, he would not deliver the dialogue as scripted and kept criticizing Richard Stanley's ideas. And the footage that they did shoot during this time was deemed totally unusable. So it seemed like he was going through something at the time, whatever what it was. But it manifested in bullying, essentially, which thankfully we've never had to worry about on any of our movies.
No.
Yeah. But and because of this, Val Kilmer being kind of unhinged, the studio blamed Richard Stanley for not being able to control him. And so, on the second day of filming, there's a lot of stuff that was going on. There was really bad weather. The location had terrible, terrible weather, and they had to stop filming. And Rob Morrow on the second day was like, he could not take the tension and the hostility and everything on set. So what he did was he called up New Line chairman Bob Shea in Hollywood and was like crying and saying, please, I can't take this. Please let me out of my contract. I don't want to do this movie. I can't do this anymore. You don't know me, but I'm working on this movie and it's just going awful. And Bob Shea was like, okay, yeah, you can leave. Side note for context, Bob Shea is the guy who greenlit the Lord of the Rings movies at New Line. Like,
cool.
they're in the story that they tell about, pitching that to New Line. He was the guy who was like, you should make it 3 films and all that stuff. Anyways, after a third day of filming, there were emergency consultations with on-set executives, and New Line fired Richard Stanley by a fax machine, which,
wow,
not great, not fun. And the director,
break up over text.
I know, essentially, yeah. He apparently reacted angrily, shredding documents in revenge, and then vanished after being, well, essentially, 2 of these PA guys, I can't remember exactly what their titles were. They were said, get Richard Stanley to the airport and on a plane. And they took him there. And then after they took him to the airport, it was reported like he went missing. Like, they were like, he didn't get on the plane, or he went missing in LA. Like, no one knew where he was. And they were
my gosh.
They were they were really, everyone was kind of like, where did he go? This is and part of this kind of is exacerbated by the rumors that came up on set. So there was kind of this, and this is all very unclear necessarily, and I wasn't there obviously, but some people say that these rumors came up because Val Kilmer was a huge star at the time and Richard Stanley was a new director, so they kind of like made it seem like he was just this crazy director. But he did go missing and no one knew where he was, after a couple days after they took him to the airport. But they were scared about him leaving. So before they had left, they said, hey, take your full director's fee on the condition that you leave quietly and not speak about firing. And so obviously when he disappeared, everyone was in a panic, and they were like, he's going to come back and he's going to try to stop the filming. Like, he's going to like burn the sets down or something. Like, everybody was legitimately scared.
Yeah.
And so they tightened security in case like he came back and he like showed up.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Makes
so
sense.
yeah. And so when he was fired, this made shockwaves throughout the cast and crew because obviously he worked with all these people. Um, Firuza Balk, the actress, she stormed off when she heard this news, and she's like, "They can't do that. If they do this, if they fire him, you're gonna have to fire me, and I'm not gonna do this." And she tells a story that she didn't know her geography, so she went to a production assistant and was like, "You're gonna drive me to Sydney right now, which is 2,500 kilometers away." Um, so very
So it's a big
far.
place.
Yeah, and so whether or not when she got into Sydney or wherever, eventually her agent said, "If you do this, if you walk from the set, you will never work in Hollywood again. You will break your career and you'll never work ever, ever." And so she went back to set,
Mm,
but she was very upset by the firing of Richard Stanley. So
yeah.
John Frankheimer was brought in to replace him, and he agreed to the movie because he wanted to work with Marlon Brando. That was the big draw for him. And
Got to
they had
go to the island first.
I know they offered the job to Philip Kaufman um before Frankheimer, but Frankheimer was kind of known as like you need someone to make a movie, solid movie, fix a thing. Like he was a seasoned director. So that's kind
Yeah.
of how they used him. Frankheimer didn't like the script, and so when he before he took the job, they were like his wife said, "Well, you should ask for a really ridiculous price because if they say no, no big deal because you don't want to do it. But if they say yes, that means you get a lot of money." And so that's what happened.
Fair enough.
And so he also asked for a three-picture deal in exchange for his services. Um, and so in the first few days when he met with the actors, he kind of had this demeanor of like, "Hey guys, I don't know what's going on, but please just trust me, be on my side. I've been in situations like this before. We will make it through this a-okay. It'll be fine." And that's kind of how he approached it, which seems like a good play, I think, if you're
That's
brought into
level-headed, I think.
level-headed. Yeah. And in a few days after that, he was name calling people.
Oh, he almost had it.
I know, he almost had it. They described him as like kind of a very old school director. Like when we
Yeah.
picture directors, we picture the chair, the big
Yeah.
what's the
The
tube?
megaphone.
The megaphone screaming and shouting, like yelling. And his approach was very different from Richard Stanley. And it alienated a lot of the cast and crew.
It's a bummer.
Yeah. So um Brando, for whatever reason, it was up to him, but he thought, "Hey, yeah, let's since we're changing directors, let's have this script be rewritten by one of Frankheimer's guys to kind of punch things up a little bit, help along." Um and so in this kind of shuffling of power in different roles, Frankenheimer also needed a new actor to replace Rob Morrow, who had called Bob Shea and said, "Hey, please let me quit." And that's when they bring in Remus Lupin, David Thewlis.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the whole production was shut down for about a week and a half while these changes were being implemented. Once the shooting began, the problems continued. So Marlon Brando again, he returned eventually during that week, and he routinely spent hours in his air-conditioned trailer where he was supposed to be on when he was supposed to be on camera, while tons of actors and extras were in the tropical heat in this jungle in full makeup and heavy costumes. So if you've seen the movie or if I've seen bits of it or seen the costumes, they're like it's the real deal. Full head
Yeah.
to toe makeup, and they're out there in tropical weather heat while Marlon Brando's just in his air conditioned cooler, um, refusing to come out for one reason or another.
That ain't right.
um, Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando had a rivalry on the movie. I guess that's the best way to put it. They did not get along at all, and it
It,
escalated into open hostility.
that doesn't
And
surprise me. Hearing how they're both acting, it's like these guys don't sound like they're gonna get along at all.
yeah,
Yeah.
so on one occasion, um, the they both went into their own trailers and refused to come out unless the other one came out first. So like Marlon Brando was like, "Well, I'm not going to come out unless Val Kilmer comes out first." And then Val Kilmer was like, "I'm not going to come out until Marlon Brando comes out first." Um
I want to know how something like how that's like that's your logical response. This sounds
yeah,
like,
It's like
playground
it's like
elementary
children.
school
Yeah.
behavior. Yeah.
it really does. It's not too different than the kindergartners I work with.
Yeah, same.
Um
Weird.
but what's interesting is that Frankheimer and Kilmer, they also didn't get along very well.
Mm.
So after arguing or after this whole kind of thing, Frankenheimer said, "I don't like Val Kilmer. I don't like his work ethic, and I don't want to be associated with him ever again." And Marlon Brando said to Val Kilmer, "Your problem is that you confuse the size of your paycheck with the size of your talent." Which is like, it's burn
Those are
right there.
those are fighting words. I think Marlon won that one though. That was a pretty good one.
It's a pretty
Yeah.
good roast. And then when they finished filming Kilmer's final scene, Frankenheimer reportedly said to the cast and crew, "Now get that bastard off of my set."
Woo!
Yeah. Now, to share
What
a
a great
little,
relationship.
Spicy.
this really does sound like I'm bashing Val, or the people are bashing Val Kilmer and it's all his fault. But
Yeah.
to give him like his own voice or whatever, this is what people said kind of like um I like they've said encounter or like this is evidence against that it was all Val Kilmer's fault and all that kind of thing. So
Hmm.
Kilmer himself denied having a feud with Marlon Brando, and he shared some behind the scenes footage of friendly moments he had with Brando, as well as his complaining to Thulis about Frankheimer, the director, in his
Mhm.
documentary Val, which I didn't see that documentary, but that was about Val Kilmer. But apparently, in that, there's footage of him getting along with Marlon Brando and David Thewlis, kind of complaining about the director. But I haven't seen it. I can't say for sure. Um, in his
Yeah.
memoir, I'm Your Huckleberry, Kilmer said Frankenheimer went on to blame me publicly for ruining the movie. I always thought it an odd thing to try to do, blame me for his failure to make an entertaining film because my character dies halfway through, spoilers, and the last half of the film sucks as bad as the first. His words, not mine. Um,
Well,
so, he's like, "Hey, it wasn't all me." Like, so some of this could totally be,
it was only half me.
yeah. Um, but what the screenwriter Ron Hutchinson said was that everyone behaved monstrously to each other, and Brando had poisonous relations with most actors. So there's probably a little bit of truth to all of this that we're hearing, would be
Yeah,
my guess. Um,
makes sense.
Marlon Brando's attitude on the film. This is a funny story. This is in the documentary. He was very lax about the movie, very just low key. At one point, Fairuza, the actress, she goes up to him and said, "Hey, great to meet with you, great to work with you. Do you think there's a time that you and I could sit down to maybe discuss our characters, talk about the movie, and that kind of thing?" And he was like, "It doesn't matter. None of this matters. I'm here, you're looking pretty. Like, forget about all of this. It's not, none of this is real." Like, that was what he said to another actor when she was like, "Hey, can we discuss our characters?"
Wow.
Yeah. He was just like, none of this is
Mentally,
important.
this man he's on the island.
Yeah.
It's like senioritis or just like, you know what I mean? Like he's
Yeah.
just in it for the paycheck or whatever. Um,
Huh.
it seemed from what people say that Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer were there to mess with the movie as much as possible. Um, Marlon Brando was respectful and had fun, like in his own way. Like he was never, from what people said in the movie and in the documentary, it sounded like he was never necessarily like a bully like Val Kilmer was. Val Kilmer seemed to be just an outright bully who would try to belittle people. Marlon Brando would just be like, let's put a grape tree in the scene. I should wear a straw hat right now. Does anyone have a straw hat? I should have peacock feathers behind me. Like he would do that kind of like, okay, I don't know, see what this adds, and that's gonna kill a lot of time that we don't need it,
Yeah.
but okay, it seemed like that kind of thing.
He's just
Uh,
having fun.
yeah. But
Huh.
it seemed like Kilmer was kind of more of the antagonistic one between the two. But there's a story someone said in the documentary. They said that while they were shooting like a take, shooting a scene, Val Kilmer was behind the camera and he had a cigarette and he was going over to the focus puller and like putting out his cigarette on like the guy's like beard hairs or like his hair and was like just touching it. It's like, what are you doing? Like,
What?
I don't know why he did that. I don't know if that's
That's
true, but that's
that's messed up.
not.
Better hope he's not got like beard oil in there or something.
I
That
don't.
could.
Not very cash money. Um, yeah, that's that's a lot of the relationship stuff that happened on the movie. But in addition to all of that, Brando and Kilmer out of the way. On a daily basis, new script pages were constantly being turned in, and I think that's a recurring theme in all of our movies. Where, well,
Yeah.
most of them that we talked about is like rewriting movies on the fly. Um, and according to David Thewlis, what he said was, we all had a different idea of where it should go. I even ended up improvising some of the main scenes with Marlon. Thewlis went on to write his character personally, so there's these constant rewrites, and a lot of these got on Marlon Brando's nerves. Um, and kind of similar to how he did on all his other movies, he didn't like to learn lines. He just liked to, have his, what he would do is he would have an earpiece in his ear and someone would feed him his lines. That way he didn't have to think or anything. He just could just repeat the words. Um, so on top of rewrites, he didn't want to learn his lines. He's learned the radio. Where they were in the jungle is it would pick up police signals. So he would be in the middle of a take and then suddenly he'd go, there's a robbery at Woolworths.
He'd say it?
He would say what the police would say because he didn't want to think. He just spouted whatever was said into his ear, like Anchorman. You guys seen Anchorman?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like how he only reads a teleprompter. So
Oh my
that
gosh.
that was Val Kilmer, or that was Marlon Brando.
Well,
Which I
shoot.
so
I
you
should
got
be Marlon Brando next. I could be a great actor.
so you
There's a
got David.
kangaroo in the road. It won't move.
You got actors rewriting some of their stuff personally. You got new script rewrites coming in. There's improvisation, and Marlon Brando's giving out police reports. Like, I can't see how. Oh my goodness, this would be so stressful.
I'm gonna watch this movie this weekend.
I know.
I gotta see this.
Meanwhile, while all this is going on, for getting lots of extras, they had a bunch of hippies coming because right, it's the middle of the jungle. They don't have a lot of different people, so they had this kind of big how do you say it, like not like a hippie commune, but it was kind of like a hippie commune because they were just kind of like, hey, everybody, come on down, like we're gonna be shooting this movie. They would like kind of camp by the site. A lot of sex, drugs, rock and roll kind of stuff going on. It seemed very Woodstockies from what I gathered from the footage.
Just hanging
Is
out around a movie shoot.
really because it was kind of like, and the vibe that I got from even the actors who were in costume or the extras who were all in the stuff, they had so much time to kill, right? And they would go on for really long days. So it really did devolve into sex, drugs, and rock and roll for that whole time. But um
Wow.
during the production and like the wrangling of all these extras, there's these people staying kind of in the woods, and on one occasion there's some PAs who went down there. Or again, I don't know, these were the same PAs who were to drive him to the airport. I don't
Hmm.
know if they're PAs, but I'm going to refer to them for the purpose of this conversation. They were PAs. Um,
Okay.
they were down there and they saw Richard Stanley in the woods. And it turned out that he had been living in an isolated farm nearby, just on a little bit of property. And he had seen the lights from all the hippies and all the people, the extras who were in the movie. So he went down and he was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're extras in this movie that's going on over there." And the PAs discovered him and the extras found him. And the PAs are like, "I kind of want to see like what would happen if we threw Richard Stanley into this mix." So they took Richard Stanley back to their hotel and everything where they're staying and would show him pages of the script that was being rewritten. And Richard Stanley would kind of do like a riff tracks on it. He would be like, "Oh gosh, this is awful. Oh, this is terrible. Ah, blah, blah, blah." And he'd be like, "Oh gosh, what I'd love to see what's going on." And so what they did was they snuck him onto the set in costume. Because there's all these creatures.
Pause. This would make a fantastic movie.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
This would make a fantastic film.
Well, it's a documentary, so you can see all this play out.
I'm like, this is like an absurd comedy.
It
Yeah.
really is.
Just like you've
It's
got
so
this like
funny.
famous actor just reading or like repeating like police reports while he's trying to say his lines.
Mhm.
You got the
Changed nothing.
ex-screenwriter just showing up out of the blue. You
Mhm.
got hippies just smoking the place up.
Exactly, exactly.
This
So
poor artist who's been working on this thing
Yeah.
for years and you got booted.
so he's on the set. He's in a creature costume. He's in the full makeup. And while they're shooting, there's this one producer, I can't remember what role he played, but it's tropical jungle heat. And in between takes, they'd all take off their masks, they'd be there sweating. This guy, he were constantly seeing this one guy who would just stay with his like costume on, his headpiece on, and he'd go over to him and be like, "Hey, you doing all right?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing great. I'm just enjoying being a part of the film." Um, and it was only later that he realized that was Richard Stanley. So Richard Stanley is
He's in
in
the
the
movie?
movie. He's in the movie, and if you watch a
Incredible.
documentary, they isolate the parts and they kind of draw circles around him, so you can see where he is in the movie. And it was hilarious because he's there in quite a bit of the scenes. And in these scenes, they well, I mean, they were so scared that he was going to sabotage the set, right?
Yeah.
Little did they know that he's in the movie in costume. And in these crazy set pieces, they literally hand him torches and hatches to use within the scene. And he's standing there like I could burn this whole thing down if I wanted to, but he didn't. He never like actually did anything, but he was there in costume.
I need this movie.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
should. Oh man. It's prime. It's so good.
Yeah. So speaking from his perspective, what Richard Stanley said at the time is that he had a totally mental emotional breakdown because obviously this is his dream project. It was so stressful, and so he went to the like I said, an isolated farm. He's like, "Can I live in a little patch of land over here?" Um, and so they were like, he was like, "Yeah," and he was just living in the woods, just kind of doing his thing, and it was kind of like that. I'm not sure if it helped him, but like it was kind of one of the once he was more removed from it, he was able to like go and check it out.
Mhm.
And so it says he's a dog man. So if you do watch the movie, look for the dog man. But again, if you watch the documentary, they isolate and circle who he is. Um, and it was reportedly said that he showed up to the film's wrap party where he ran into Val Kilmer, who apologized to Richard Stanley for his removal from the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty wild. That's about all of the production stuff. And I don't have a ton of post-production, but just to kind of wrap up here. And actually I don't even really have any post-production stuff, but I do have, the reception afterwards. So
Yeah. I want to know that.
film had negative reviews. 22%
Bummer.
of the critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave it a negative review. The consensus was it's a timid and unfocused in its storytelling. The Island of Dr. Moreau is more lackluster misfire than morbid curiosity. It only grossed 49 million worldwide on a $40 million budget. With marketing and other expenses, it was just a total loss for the studio. And well, it was kind of interesting then to note. Oh, I didn't even talk. There's so much I'm leaving out here, but I got to. But there was one guy in the island of Dr. Moreau who was, I think he was the world's shortest person in the world at one point or something, and he was
Huh?
there on set. And Marlon Brando loved him, and he was like, he should dress as a smaller version of me. I want this guy to be like a mini me in the movie. And that
He saw
character
Austin Powers.
inspired Austin Powers.
No
Did-
It
way.
was directly inspired by the that character.
That's
That's
so that's in the
cool.
movie too. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So if you watch the movie, that's where Mike Myers got the idea for Mini Me in Austin Powers.
So weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I think that's a big positive that came out of it. This is
Yeah.
weird, which I don't know. I mean, what even if this counts, but apparently there was a director's cut of the movie released on Blu-ray in 2012 and DVD in 2017, which made it 4 minutes longer because it's a 96-minute film, but this extended it to 100 minutes. Which at this point, is that even really a director's cut? Like what it like you know
Yeah,
what I
unless
mean?
you're reorganizing scenes, that's not a whole lot. That's
Yeah.
like a bonus. That's like deleted scenes added in. That's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like extended edition of Prisoner of Azkaban type stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Richard Stanley, obviously, he did not direct another feature film until 2019 when he came back with Color Out of Space, with Nick Cage, which is I mean, that's an excellent movie. I really like that movie.
It's pretty cool.
So I can't,
Yeah.
and I
It's a
like
good one.
Hardwire. I like some of his other stuff. I mean, obviously he didn't really direct The Island of Dr. Moreau, but he seemed pretty traumatized from the experience.
So
Um,
eventually he came out of the woods and it was after 20 how many years? When did this movie come out again?
well, this was in
96.
96,
96.
Okay.
and Color Out of
Okay.
Space came out in 2019. But he did direct like short films here and there along
Okay.
the way.
Okay.
And he was living in France. He was going to do the Dunwich Horror, another
That's
Lovecraft adaptation, but that is not going to happen because he was charged with domestic violence in 2021, which is unfortunate that there's yet another creative in the Hollywood industry who's, you know, little,
Not great.
not, yeah,
Making poor decisions.
making bad decisions. So that's kind of awful, but
Yeah.
it's not a rare thing in Hollywood, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
that being said, like I said, there is a documentary that is about this whole thing. That's where I got a lot of this information. There is more or there's even more stuff in the documentary that I didn't even touch on, which is fascinating. And get this, the title of the movie of that documentary is called Lost Soul: The Doomed Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Moreau, which is like they put doomed in the title right there. It's like
It's like
perfect.
they wrote it for us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they interview a lot of people who worked on the movie. Richard Stanley himself, they talked about with Firuza Balk, they talked with a lot of the like crew members and stuff like that. It's a really good watch and it's really fascinating. And again, like I tried my best to articulate the wildness of all of that, but
How long of a documentary is it? Like an hour? Hour and a
it's
half?
like 90 minutes or so, something like that.
Cool.
I think the last I checked, it was on Amazon Prime, the freebie for like free with ads thing.
Okay.
But I also have an MP4 of the movie too, so that's how I watched it. But yeah, that is the story of the Island of Dr. Moreau.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Again, the behind the scenes needs to be a movie. That's my
Yeah.
takeaway from that.
Yeah.
It's literally just written for you.
Yeah.
What's the lesson we can take from this?
I mean, I feel like there's a few.
It's like well, obviously from an actor's standpoint, work well with your actors,
Mm-hmm.
do well. I mean, it's kind of sucks looking back, seeing how what was the original director's name again?
Richard Stanley.
So how Richard Stanley, him and having like Marlon Brando backing him up on the project, and then having everything fall apart. It's kind of a
Mhm.
bummer to see like that breakdown, and then to have this new director come in who it seems like he's got a pretty level-headed, strong background in filmmaking, and it's gonna pilot the ship, and then just proceeds to crash it like even more. It's a
Yeah.
bummer.
Yeah.
I think the best lesson is do what he said he was going to do in the beginning
Yeah.
and have that attitude, and don't do what he was doing by the end.
That's a good point because I think when we talk about filmmaking, a lot of times we say it's good to be transparent with your cast and crew. Trust is earned, not just it's not like
Yeah.
you don't automatically give someone trust. You got to earn that.
Yeah.
But I think there are times when things are kind of going wrong and everything is kind of chaotic. I think there are times where it is appropriate as a leader to say, "Listen, guys, trust me on this. I'll take care of this, but you got to just trust me. Just let me do my thing, and I'll do what's best for the movie and for you all." Obviously, he didn't do that. Seems like, but
Yeah.
that's something we can all do in our movies.
Yeah. I like that. That's a good lesson.
I
That's the
tried.
hard part of all these movies is like there's a million lessons.
Yeah.
There's a reason these were doomed productions. It wasn't just one thing going wrong. There was a
Yeah,
whole lot.
yeah, lot of problems.
All right. Well, this leads us into our next segment of talking about what we've been watching. And how we've been doing this is one of us will pick a movie that all of us have to watch, and then we'll discuss it for a little bit here on the podcast. So last podcast, I was the only one who needed to watch this movie because I was the only one who hadn't seen it. And that movie was Blonde. So there's not much to talk about with this movie, not much discussion going on around it. It's pretty, just let's just get into it, because I mean, what, 30 seconds of discussion, then we'll move on. Yeah. So Blonde.
It's a very safe, family-friendly movie.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
What was it rated again? NC-17. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the kids. For the
Mhm.
kids.
Yeah.
Who wants to summarize this movie and what it's about?
Basically, this film is based off of a fictional retelling novel that was written in the 90s, I believe.
Yeah.
And they basically translated it to film. And it kind of goes over basically what the book kind of portrays Marilyn Monroe's life as throughout these series of events.
Fictionally, though, like it's not her real
Yeah.
life.
No.
Yeah,
There's a
exactly.
lot.
So
There's a lot of fake things in the movie, like
Mhm.
not historically accurate things. There's some stuff that's real, but a lot of stuff is just totally made up and
Yeah.
fabricated entirely.
And I think that was an interesting part of the discussion online was, or something that was seemed to be overlooked in a lot of conversation, was that it was an adaptation of a fictional book.
Mhm.
And a part of that might have been due to the way it was advertised.
Yeah,
Maybe.
because it
Yeah.
was kind of, I remember seeing ads and thinking it was a biopic.
Yeah.
So that,
There,
I'm sure, influenced a lot of people going into it. And I mean, just for context here, we're aware that there's some heavy discussion, and we're
Oh, yeah.
like do we want to say kind of what that reception has been, what the two kind of, because I know there's like some camps that people are in about this movie. Should we
Well,
kind of give some context?
Yeah,
there's
let's do that.
people who are very against the movie, and there's people who are very for the movie. I mean, that's really, to put it
Yeah.
lightly, a lot of the
Yeah.
controversy, yeah, like you said, I think the main points of criticism, which I don't disagree with,
Mhm.
um, are like, it is a movie about a real woman,
Mhm.
but none of it's real, so that feels exploitive. The nature of the movie feels exploited, like that whole idea of it just felt
Yeah.
exploitive to her. Um,
Well,
and
yeah. As an, yeah.
the
Go ahead.
gratuitousness of the movie, like the events that happen in the movie,
Hmm.
because they were fictional, and the graphic nature and the traumatized nature of those events felt disingenuous, to put it
Mhm.
lightly, carefully. Those
Yeah.
seem to be the main like points of
Complaints.
contention
Yeah.
for a lot of folks who are against the movie.
Hmm.
Um, whereas the people who are for the movie, um, which is kind of funny because that's where the people who are for the movie, I think, really, again, I don't disagree with this either necessarily, are really were engaged by the form and
Hmm.
the technical elements of the film and how
Mhm.
it wove together the story,
Yeah.
or told this, I won't even say narrative, like this loose montage. It felt like very stream of consciousness, the way the
Yeah.
Yeah.
film flowed. It wasn't so much of a narrative, but it was more like a series of memories.
It's
Uh,
very disassociated,
mhm.
um, which I think was interesting. I mean, we can talk more about it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very interesting decision how they made the movie flow.
Yeah. But those are the two camps of the people who are very adamant about like how they feel about the movie. There's people who absolutely love it and there's people who absolutely hate it. And to give my context for how I feel about this, like I've said before, I'm not a film reviewer. I'm not about putting out unwarranted criticism or my thoughts on movies made by other filmmakers, because I think that's bad taste and poor taste. So if I don't like a movie, I simply don't speak about it publicly. I'll praise movies I do like, but if a movie's confusing to me and I feel personally conflicted, I do feel compelled to bring that up, because if just don't like something, I just won't, I just won't talk about it because I think that's poor taste to bring something up, or I'll try to
Mhm.
find the good in that thing.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but what I will say is that I feel conflicted on Blonde in, and you can take that what it means, but to me what that means is like, I'm torn between like aspects of it I do connect to and aspects that I don't connect to as much. And I want to share that because I think personally that good art should do that to an extent. Um, Even if I don't ultimately love how it might make me feel or that kind of thing. I mean, I've kind of said
Yeah.
similar things. Does that sum up
Mhm.
kind of how you guys feel too,
I
to an
think
extent?
so. Yeah. It's
Because
it's very much a two-sided coin.
like I'm not about to just
Yeah.
bash any movie regardless. And
Yeah.
because again, I like to praise everything, but I do think that when movies are complicated and bring up such like strong reactions from people, I think I like to point out that like I like to point that out in myself, because again, if I just hated the movie, I would just lie and like try to look for stuff that I liked or just not talk about it.
Mhm.
And if I
Mhm.
loved it, I would say what I loved about it. But for
Yeah.
movies, I do like to talk about like, oh, I feel very conflicted about this. There's things I connect with, there's things I don't connect with.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm throwing that idea out there. You
Yeah.
can make of that what you will. Um, but it's been
Well, and,
interesting to see the discussion online, to
mhm.
say the least.
Yeah.
And generally, those two parties both are in ways correct,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
this, like the tech, like just going into the technical side of this movie, it's a gorgeous film. Um, I want to look into more about some of how they pull off some of their stuff. And just like as a camera person, like watching the movie is stunning. And
Yeah.
it's really cool to see how they put together this piece, and like and on a narrative level, like the way it's edited and it flows, I think was very effective as a movie. But again, you're watching this movie and you're watching this woman get subjected to very horrible things, and that's like that's that double-sided coin. So I think both camps in a way are very valid, but it's
Mhm.
yeah.
What
And
I what I
that con yeah.
well,
Go ahead,
you
Jordan.
sorry, I interrupted you. You finish your
No.
thought.
No. Go ahead.
Okay.
I didn't have much else to land on there.
Well, what I was talking with Caleb from RC Films about is I think we both agreed that it had a lot more in common with like a Gaspar Noé French New Wave extremity movie like
Mm,
Irreversible, or something
yeah.
like
I could see that. Yeah.
Antichrist, or like a Lars von Trier. It felt a lot more similar to one of those kind of movies than it did like a traditional biopic.
I see
Um
that
Yeah.
connection. Yeah.
it's a horror movie.
Hmm.
It felt like that.
Yeah.
Um and I think that's important. I think a lot of these things are important to know going into it so you're prepared for what you're going to watch
Yeah.
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. Because I think some people were caught off guard and some people
Oh yeah.
heard about it and they made up their mind before they went to see it. So it's kind of like I think people should be aware of like here's the discourse, here's kind of what's going on. I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah.
It
Because I
is.
think a lot of people went into it because the vast majority of your audience, most of the time, when you put out a movie, is it's going to be from word of mouth most likely. Because like people like us that like to like dive deep into movies and stuff like that before seeing them, or but in some cases anyways, most of the time we're not in the majority of audiences. So most people are like see like see Blonde on Netflix and they're like, "Oh, it's the Marilyn Monroe movie." And that's all
Yeah.
they have going into the movie. Or like they see the latest Marvel movie and they're like, "Oh, it's the Captain America movie," or "Oh, it's the movie with Val Kilmer or whatever or something." I don't know. Or it's a Tom Cruise movie or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you go into it with that singular state of mind, and then everything that exists outside of that is either unexpected or contrary to what you hoped or expected for that film. And an interesting thing that I've noticed, particularly with this film and the online discussion, it kind of highlighted a lot of issues that I have with film criticism, in that a lot of people like to hone in on one particular thing that stuck out to them, whether it's positive or negative, and that is the primary and like only like sole thing that they will focus on when
Hmm.
talking about something. And I mean, we could go into how that ties into other subjects in life, but I just thought that was something interesting to note in
Yeah.
regards to this particular film and film criticism in general.
Right, because it's like I think a interesting thing that to ask yourself whenever you're engaging with any text or any movie is to be like, I think the question of why is a underrated question when it comes to
Yeah.
filmmaking,
Hmm.
because I think, and I know again the RC boys can speak to this a lot because they dealt with this on their film Not So Amazing. Um, Assuming intent can create, I think, misreadings of movies or maybe misinterpretations. Not saying that you're
Mhm.
wrong for feeling a certain way about a movie, but they
Mhm.
can. I think it's more helpful to ask yourself why, like,
Mhm.
than right off the bat, you know, accusing a movie of doing a certain thing. Like it's fine to not like
Mhm.
something. Like for instance, let's take the fictional narrative. Like this movie Blonde is, let's I mean, don't know a exact percentage, but let's say it's like it's 80% fake. All of it's fake. So I think rather than say, I don't like that, that's wrong that it's fake. I don't disagree with that thought, but I also think it's interesting to ask yourself, well, okay, well, why is it fake? Why did the movie decide to be a fake movie and or a fake narrative? Like have none.
Yeah.
Why is it about a real woman and the narrative is fictional? Why is that? I think that's a more helpful question when you approach all sorts of criticism because it can maybe lead to more helpful, constructive conversations rather than just blasting something. Again, it's fine if you don't like the answer to that question why. Like, but I think it's an interesting if you're prepared to have it. I think it's an interesting line of thought to follow. Like, why is the movie totally fictional? Also, why does every single scene of the movie look like exactly like the Hollywood iconography, like the famous portraits? Like they straight up recreate iconic 1950s Hollywood images. Why did they do that? Why is this fictional? Why does the movie depict scene after scene of horrible violence against this person? Again, you don't have to like it. I don't think anybody should necessarily like have to like anything, but I think asking that question why can lead to some interesting places. Even if you don't agree or enjoy like the answers to those. Because I think the movie I think there's an interesting conversation that the movie is engaging with to an extent, and I don't quite understand what that conversation is necessarily. I kind of get it, but I don't really. But I would love to see like a scholarly article written on Blonde and or in some way or some textual analysis of the movie and what it's trying to say or some psychoanalytical stuff. But I'm just not seeing it. And that's just part of that's just the nature of Twitter and bloggers and all that kind of thing. They're not like scholarly articles, but
No.
I think there's something
It's all about
interesting.
what you feel. It's not about thinking about things.
Yeah, but I think there's something interesting in the movie. There's something there going on. I don't personally understand it. And again, what I experienced in the movie was a lot of conflicting feelings. So I'm not the person to make all those connections and everything, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm just sorry. I'm
Go
just
with that
rambling.
No, you're
information.
good.
And if you haven't seen the movie,
Yeah.
experience it if you want. And if you don't, that's cool too. And whatever you come out with, I think I think at the end of the day, like all of us have gone through film school and have gone through times where you're, having to like critically engage with something, and just having that exercise and trying to ask those questions of why. And I think it's just a healthy mindset to have with any movie. And some are easier to engage with that way than others, but it's a muscle I think definitely to build.
It's also cool to not like do that too. If you're like, no, I don't want to, I don't want to think about it. I just didn't like it. Like, that's cool too. Like
that's okay. We're trying to just facilitate a conversation of how we like and encourage approaching.
Look, we got a podcast to keep up, guys. We got to engage with it somehow.
We got 30 minutes to fill here. Like, it's cool to like, Zach, you go ahead.
I will say this. What was I going to say? Oh my goodness, I lost it.
I'm sorry, Zach, I cut you off.
We did this to you.
Wait a second. No, I've got it. I've almost got it. Okay, so I've been taking a visual arts class, and one thing that I've really gleaned from it is being able to really pull out when viewing something, whether it's a painting, a sculpture, a film, anything like that. Authorial or artist's intent, and doing your best to educate and identify what that is. Also identifying your reaction, your feelings, and seeing how they line up with authorial intent.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is coming across well, or
I get what
I
you
don't know.
it's similar to what Caleb talks about, because something that happened to him on Not So Amazing was people would say, you made this movie and there are these jokes in it, or there's these story events that happened, so therefore you set out to make a movie that was intentionally offensive and meant to put other races down. Like this was intentionally racist. To which Caleb was, from his perspective, he was like, no, I tried to my intent was to do the opposite, but the movie on that level was not interpreted that way by certain viewers. So a lot of people got really offended by Not So Amazing. So
Yeah.
and that's something that Caleb has talked about a whole bunch too. Yeah.
Well, it's like trying to see what what kinds of choices does the artist make technically, and how can that be interpreted, and see how that invokes certain feelings, certain thought processes and stuff like that, um, versus surface level assessments of I like it or I don't like it, going, why do I like it? Why do I not like it? Why does this make me feel scared? Why does this make me feel apprehensive, types of things. And stuff like that. Because a lot of the dialogue around this film, um, to get more specific about certain criticisms that I've seen, were a lot about like, oh, is this movie pornographic? Is this movie taking a certain stance on abortion? Is this movie trying to say something about classic Hollywood? What is it trying to say? And it's like, it could be trying to say those things. It could not be trying to say certain things. What are the technical and visual choices that they make to distinguish it one way or another, or neither way, and stuff like that, and trying to see beyond what could be surface level assessments, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, delving into intent is a tricky thing.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the director sitting next to us to ask them all the time. I mean, sometimes directors are very open about what they intend from their movie once it comes out, or even before, but that's not always the case. I know we've talked about this before through videos and podcasts. But when we're making our movies, and we're showing it to each other, often that's how the discussion goes, is not this shot was a bad shot or this scene was a bad scene. It's, oh, this made me feel or think this way. What was your intention behind editing these shots together? And having a discussion around that. And that helps all of us make a movie that's more well-rounded and actually getting at what we want it to be conveying. So then it's not so much me assuming the audience is going to get it, but it gives us a testing ground and a place to discuss what we're trying to do, and make our movies more successful in that way. So
well, it's kind of like I love I mean that's really the best way to approach any kind of feedback when you're getting feedback from other filmmakers, because if you're talking to a guy, right, and you're showing him your movie and he's like, there should really be a bird in that scene, it's like, why? And he's just like, well, I just really love birds. Or like he just like, everybody has their own kind of idea in their mind what this movie should be or how it should be, but the only person who can say that for sure is the director, like, because who has the right to say it, because it's like, they're director, they're the main, or if you worked on, I guess, too. But so often I think filmmakers will watch other cuts of things and be like, oh, this shot should be longer, or this should be shorter, or you should cut this scene out, or this and that and that. And they'll dish out a lot of feedback based on what they think the movie should be before seeing what the intent was and if those choices reflect that intent. So yeah, a little tip for you filmmakers out there. Always see what the director was trying to go for, and that's how you critique of another filmmaker's work if they're asking you for feedback, is thinking about, does this choice that the filmmaker made, does that move towards their desired intent or away from it? And that's kind of the
Mhm.
best way, I think, to
Yeah.
approach that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think it is good to be aware um, of your own, I guess, feelings towards something. And those things are, v- of course, valid and stuff like that, because we all have different worldviews and stuff like that. And there's no, well, I won't go into that, but um, that we're getting very deeply philosophical here.
Yeah.
um, but kind of finding different ways of analyzing things of like, here's how it affected me, here's what the artist was going for, and kind of both separating and combining them in different aspects of like, here's how it affect these choices affected me, why is it affecting me this way, is this what the author was going for, or types of things, stuff like that.
Well, I was just thinking within your comparison, like how there's what the director or the artist wants versus what the audience sees, and how interesting it is that for all the arts that exist, like movies are the most mass consumed, generally speaking. I mean, there's obviously music and stuff, but I mean, movies are up there as like the top consumed arts that people are like anyone, everyone is consuming, um, and having to like be as a viewer trying to reconcile like what you see in a movie and what you want it to be versus what the creator wants it to be. Like
Yeah.
that's a difficult thing, and having that tension that's going to be coming out of it, I think is a hard thing, and filmmakers don't have an easy time probably making all those things. I mean, even just in our movies, sometimes it's tricky to not think about a decision I'm making in a movie and thinking about, oh, maybe the audience won't like that, I should do it this way
Mhm.
or that way. And I think that's a hard balance as a creator, and then as someone consuming art too, to like give the creator more credit on what they're trying to do or trying to communicate,
Yeah. And well,
and going with them.
that all
Mhm.
gets dialed up to like 11 when you're adapting, like in this case, um you're using the name and face of a real
Mhm.
live person, or like if you're adapting a beloved book or comic book or remaking an old movie or whatever,
Yeah.
um that'll dial up your viewers, I guess, assessment, criticism, um
It's like a formula
different,
of like,
yeah, different forms of receiving it will be all dialed up to
mhm.
11
It's
in
like
that case.
content plus reality plus times Twitter reception
Yeah.
equals.
Yeah.
Right. I think, yeah, I think that's, I mean, I feel we go on and on about this, but I think
Yeah.
that's probably a good place to,
Let's land the plane there.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
This soft meadow of just trying to understand.
Yeah, we're just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Zach,
That's
take us into the last segment.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. On that note, we encourage you to be thoughtful in your movie analysis, but if you don't want to be, that's okay too. Moving
Just
on
don't,
to
yeah,
what
just don't
we have been
unsubscribe.
making. Hopefully, you appreciate what we make,
Mhm.
given that you are watching this. Um, but let's go into some of the things that we are currently working on, and trying to bring to you guys sometime in the relatively near future. Who wants to go first?
I have a story. So I don't have
Ooh.
much. I've kind of been on a vacation this last week. So we had a long weekend from work. I work for a school, so we have, certain holidays off. So I went to the
President's Day,
coast
baby.
hoping President's Day. It was beautiful. Went to the coast to do some work, do some relaxing. It was a lot more relaxing than it was work. I did edit some videos and stuff, but in terms of script writing, not much happened. But I brought so if you for those who are out of the loop or are new to us, we're working on 3 feature films that are adapting novels. Then we haven't publicly said what we're adapting yet, but I brought a book with me that was the novel, like a special edition one that I found at like a store at like an antique store near me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to buy this. It's like this big book. And I was gonna read it just for fun. And while we're packing up, we're getting things into the car. I set it on top of the car so that I can put some stuff in the car. And I was going to reach back up and get it
Oh
and put it away. I didn't do that.
No.
oh
So we're like
no.
pulling out of the driveway. We're driving down. We get onto Highway 99 and I'm
Oh.
stopped at a red light like 5 minutes from my house. And I hear this dude like shouting at me from his car. And so I'm like looking at him, my wife are looking at him. We're like totally confused. And then I roll my window down finally, and he's like, "There's a book on your car." And it's like, and I jump out of my car in traffic, run up, grab it. Luckily, no damage. Book's fine. Um, thank goodness. I paid like $30 for that thing. And yeah, I made it into my car.
It's a good
Yeah.
story.
So it kind of reminded me of when we were my father was a spaceman,
Yeah.
a short film we made forever ago. Jordan had that experience with the director's binder.
Except it went wrong and it flew off in
Yeah.
traffic, and then our lead actress ran into traffic and was like, I got this. I'll
I
grab
know
it.
that's what was going through my head when that was
Yeah.
happening. And I was like, it's not going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. I appreciate that guy. Because if that book had been gone, oh, I would have been heartbroken.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
not much in terms of anything. I have been working on that movie plus a short film script at the same time. And now it sounds like I'm going to make a movie about this director sneaking onto his production he's been fired from. It's a movie. We're going to have to do that. But, one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My thing that I've been working on, like all of you, I've been working on my book adaptation.
Yeah.
Ethan's laughing because there's a cut in this where I accidentally spoiled what a
Jordan
little
just
bit.
spilled a couple beans there.
Yeah. But aside from that, there's a movie that we're going to shoot in Yakima. And I've been outlining it for the last, couple weeks, and I finally sat down yesterday to write the script, and I finished the first draft today. So there you go. I don't know if you can see that. It's pretty blown out. But that's
Yeah.
the first
Oh, yeah.
draft.
Written in Highland. If you're a screenwriter and you don't know what to write
Yeah.
in,
Well,
Highland's
that's a
the way to
title
go.
page. But I have the whole thing. It is
How many pages or scenes or
96 pages.
nice?
I wrote 30 pages yesterday, and then I wrote 60 pages today, and so
Wow.
yeah,
You're like a screenwriting heavyweight champion in terms of getting it written.
well, I helped that I didn't have work today because it was a snow day, so
Yeah.
I spent I woke up at or I started writing at 7 or something. I just didn't stop until a couple hours ago. So
Yeah.
But
Good stuff.
that's gonna be a fun movie. There's some secrecy around that one too, but
Mhm.
there'll be some updates on that.
We're
shortly.
always secretive though. Let's be real.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Zach, what are you
As
working
for
on?
my movie book adaptation, I completely redid the third act.
Nice.
Rearranged many things.
It's good to be saying
Um,
that before production has started, though.
Yes.
That's not a sign of a
Yes.
doomed production if you're saying it
No,
while
no,
we're
no.
pre-production.
Yeah. No, this is it's a good type of rewrite. We're but yeah, we're gradually getting closer and closer to actual pre-production and production and stuff like that. And it's exciting.
Yeah.
I've been struggling a little bit with inspiration and stuff like that, and this has kind of been a kind of friendly nudge and kind of encouragement to not always lean on inspiration for writing.
Oh yeah.
Like
Jordan's got to you.
Jordan literally just
think-
wrote a full script in 2 days.
Do you think I wanted to spend hours just sitting on my couch today? No, but you just got to, because
Yeah.
how else is it going to get done?
Yeah. And that's been something that I've been not necessarily struggling with, but like working on for a while now in regards to like inspiration versus just sitting down and doing it even if everything's terrible. um but I just thought it's good experience, and it's pushing me both creatively and discipline wise, and it's been good. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Right on.
Nice. That's cool.
I
Well,
realized we
folks-
might have forgotten something.
Oh, what?
Did we select our next movie? Or are we
No,
gonna
we didn't.
skip? Or are we gonna not announce it?
We should. Who gets to choose next?
Wait,
think
the
it's-
movie recommendation that we're watching, or the movie we're going to talk about?
No, recommendation, because I did Blonde.
Yeah.
So does that mean Zach next?
Zach's turn.
Oh, it's my
Zach, if not, we'll just won't announce it.
Well, we're almost out of time.
We
with
didn't
this call.
pre-plan this. Let's just
you know what?
make
It will
secret.
be a surprise.
Oh, look at
because
that.
I have nothing prepared.
Great, no
Cool.
problems.
Well, thank you for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you want to know more about us and our films, you can check out our movies and our work on this channel in playlists called Feature Films. We've got short films, we got interviews and other YouTube videos on filmmaking on our channel.
If you're on Spotify, hop on over to YouTube. That's where the party is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a Patreon. So we got some cool content over there. You should check it out because it's a really
That's
awesome.
where the VIP party is. And once a month live streams too. It's pretty fun.
Yes.
Come hang out.
Yeah. But yeah, with that, thank you everyone for listening and have a good week.